It's me. We're back. I'm Robert Phoenix, your humble servant to the stars. And tonight is Sunday Night AstroLive, where we get together and we talk some deep astrology for a couple of hours. And tonight is no different. So if you're new to the program, welcome. And we cover lots of bases, lots of territories. Usually start off with a comment, or not comment, but a subject, and we're going to kind of dive into the days of Molech because we're here basically from April 17th through the 20th, 21st. There's a lot of heavy events that happen historically, some of which include, well, things like fire, burning, and the inception of genocide, which we'll find out tonight. It's going to be a happy show. And we're going to start right off on a positive note. No, by the time we're over, we will exorcise the demons of the day, and we will come to a point of reconciliation where the fire of life and creation burns like a candle, an eternal candle in your heart. But to get there, we have to go through hell. But we can do it together. I've got faith in you. Anyway, welcome to Sunday Night AstroLive. We'll kind of hang out for a little bit as people kind of start to fill in the front and the middle rows, and we get a bit of an audience here. We're almost ready to go for Taurus season. So we'll talk a little bit about Taurus tonight as well. And have I got a wacky Taurus novel to share with you? There's a whole new genre of literature that I'm just becoming aware of, and it's called monster romance. I guess it's been going on for a long time. You know, Dracula is basically a monster romance theme, isn't it? Well, this new genre takes it just a little bit further than just good old Count Dracula dressed up in a snazzy tuxedo with hypnotic eyes. Like I said, I wasn't aware of monster romance, like Monster Garage, Monster Trucks, but monster romance. This is a new one, and it touches on the theme of Taurus in a very interesting kind of way. So we'll get into some Taurus themes tonight as well as we get ready to enter into that season, that sign, and I really want to talk about, since we're going to be sort of diving into Molech and fire, I also wanted to revisit Donald Trump's chart. And I want to do a bit of a section on Trump in the underworld, which is really where he is and where he's going. What did he I think he just posted a Slipknot video on Truth Social. Did you guys see that? Is he going after the millennials? I'm not even sure. Like, okay, so my history of Slipknot goes back to the 90s when I first became aware of them. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. It's like Freddy Krueger rock or something like that. And he just posted this Slipknot video over on Truth Social. I think the song's called Psychosocial. Did you guys see that? Did you see that? I think Slipknot is premillennial. I became aware of Slipknot in like I don't know what 96, 97. So if you were born in 1990, that was a band that you would have listened to in your teen years. If I'm not Korn, Slipknot and Korn. I always associate those two bands together. Anyway, Trump's output on tweets have been quite interesting as of late, and so we're gonna revisit his chart. And there was also a request uh, that I talk a little bit more about Saturn in Aries, particularly as it relates to the individual chart. Now, I know I did a show on that a while ago, like, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago. And I went through every single house where Saturn in Aries would be showing up as it went through the various houses. Um, so instead of going through every single house, I guess what I'll do is I'll talk about the Saturn return in Aries. If you're going through your Saturn return in Aries, well, welcome to being all grown up. And then I think the request came out of somebody who was going through their second Saturn return. Now, I will give you a caveat before we get there. The second Saturn return is not as heavy as the first Saturn return. Having lived through both, and my first one being extreme to the point where I really felt like I've been thrown for a loop for years of my life. The second Saturn return was it was a tweak. It was a tweak, and we'll talk about what it means to have a tweak on the second go around of the Saturn return. And of course, we'll have the chart of the moment, and we'll take a look at where all these planetary influences are as we speak. So that's kind of the outline of the show. Little days of Molech, little Trump in the underworld, little Saturn in Aries, a little Saturn return, little hello to Taurus, and monster romance to kick us off on a Sunday night. How does that sound with everybody? Does that sound like a good thing? All right, let's do a quick little roll call here. And if you're new to the show, welcome. I'm glad you're here, and hope you stick around for a while. Let me just get through some of the meet and greets, and we'll get the ball rolling. There he is, DJ MC Miguel. What's happening? Makeda Soul One, the California Contract, KZ Gypsy Muse. Yes, that was who requested the Saturn return talk. We'll talk about that. Let's see. Road trip 1981. Man, Texas has some water issues. Bigly Barbara Boots. This the chariot awaits. Indeed. Christine Foos. What's happening? I had a close encounter with Mars conjunct Saturn. So luckily, my husband helped me avoid a rash decision. Sometimes partners are good for that. They're the check and balance in the system. Is that the root of all evil? I don't know. Could be. You'd have to ask AI. I just put in some terms, and that's what it came up with. Smoochie J. McBride. What's happening? Tondar, the title card reminds me of the Rush album, Permanent Waves. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I could kind of see that. We got Rafi. What's up, Rafi? Catherine Mueller is here. Hi, Catherine. QZ422, love back at you. There she is, the lovely and talented one. I don't hear anything. Is Robert tardy to the party? Oh, I'm here now. I'm assuming you're hearing me now. Looks like I have a level. On your predictions of prophetic dreams, I've been getting served videos from 5 to 20 years ago about prophetic dreams people had about a war with Iran, Pluto, and Aquarius working the algo, the ghost in the machine, right? Deus ex machina. How much of it are we co-creating with at this point? That's the scary thought. Sure, we leave a cookie cookie crumb trail like they did back in the old fairy tale days, so they could find their breadcrumb trail, so they could find their way out of the dark enchanted forest. So maybe perhaps it's not so magical at all, but just a byproduct of our digital footprint. But perhaps there is something else going on, that there is a merging of a consciousness that's taking place that could be kind of interesting. You never know. Let's see. We got Mark S. What's up, Mark S? Anonymous. Speaking of Molech, have you looked at the Paxton Cornyn runoff election chart? Does it show something unexpected happening? I have not done that yet. It's going to be whoever wins that race is going to have their hands full with James Tallarico. And I think both Cornyn and Paxton are vulnerable for different reasons. And Paxton, when he was Attorney General while Trump was trying to salvage his campaign in 2020, went to bat for Trump and tried to get, was it Pennsylvania, I think? He tried to sue the state of Pennsylvania to stop the vote count. And then the state of Pennsylvania ruled that Paxton didn't have any standing. So Ken Paxton's been a very loyal soldier to Donald Trump, as has John Cornyn. And neither of them can say that, Trump favored or Trump endorsed. They're both kind of equally endorsed by Trump, although I'm not quite sure how much of an endorsement it is at that point. Let me just look quickly. So Ken Paxton, let's look at his. So Ken Paxton is a Capricorn. December 23rd, he's born on the winter solstice. And John Cornyn is an Aquarian, born February 2nd. So Pluto is not quite on his sun sign. It's about 7 or 8 degrees out. If I had to take a shot with the outer planets, I would say John Cornyn is the winner of that race, just based on the outer planets, because Paxton has Neptune and Saturn squaring his sun. You could get by with the Saturn Sun square, and I think it could be reasonable, and you could fight and push and put your shoulder to the wheel. But the Neptune Sun square could be problematic. There's this guy who I've been following his basketball career a little bit, and his name is Quentin Post, and he plays for the Golden State Warriors. And he was a second-round draft pick 2 years ago and played at Boston College, and prior to that, Mississippi State. And Quentin's originally from the Netherlands. He's Dutch, and he played on the Dutch national team. And when he was in college, he was known for being a three-point shooter and a real sniper for a guy that was 7'1". In basketball terminology, they call him a stretch big. And I've been watching him. I'm thinking, God, I really like this guy. He's got a fiery spirit. He's an Aries, 0 Aries, right? And he was doing really, really well. And then all of a sudden, Saturn conjuncted his sun, and then Neptune conjuncted his sun. And I knew that this was not going to go well for his playing. Uh, so one of the things that happened is that he went from a 40% three-point shooter to a 33% three-point shooter, and he started off as a starter, and his defense was quite good, but his offense wasn't as he wasn't doing what they had drafted him to do as well as he was. And Steve Kerr, whose sun sign is opposite Quentin Post, he's a Libra, would pull Post early. He would start him, he'd play him 6 minutes, and then he'd take him out of the starting lineup, and you wouldn't see him again for until the second quarter. And this went on for a while. And what it did is it ate away at Quentin Post's confidence. And so when he got on the court, you could tell that he was trying to make up for the lost time by playing harder. And that would be the Saturn Sun conjunction. But it seemed as though Neptune would wind up negating all of that effort. And eventually, by the end of the season, Quentin Post just disappeared. Like he wound up, they traded for Kristaps Porzingis, and Porzingis got his playing time, and then Post just faded to gray. And by the time he got to the playoffs, he was in his street clothes. So it's fascinating watching these aspects take place in real time. And when you can watch a player go through something and it's like, oh man, this guy's really good. And then I looked up, oh shit, I think he's 1 degree Aries. And it's like, oh, here comes Saturn, here comes Neptune. I think, oh, he's kind of fucked. He's kind of fucked. He's just going to disappear. And I'd be surprised. I would not be surprised if Quentin Post doesn't return to Europe to go play basketball. His contract is up. I'm not sure the Warriors will re-sign him. He may get some bites from another NBA team, but it's going to, once Saturn leaves his sun, which it has, right now it's just Neptune on his sun. And I think for somebody who's a very early Aries, if you're an early Aries and you have Neptune on your sun, that could be a real identity crisis. Like you just don't know who you are anymore, especially if your focal point was being a significant cog in, like in this case, a team or a group, and then all of a sudden you've sort of lost your standing, which can happen with Neptune. And now who are you? Where do you go? What do you do? It is a real test of faith to be able to hang in there. And I mean, Neptune's going to be on his sun for a couple of years. And I think for Aries, that's tough. If you're a Pisces and Neptune is on your sun, it's like homecoming, right? I mean, I don't think it's that. I mean, I could be wrong, but I'd rather be a Pisces and have Neptune on my sun. You'd be a fish in water than be an Aries with Neptune on your sun. I mean, that would just get me steaming mad, I think. It's like, hey, what about me? Remember me? I used to make all those 3-point shots. Remember me? You relegated me to the end of the bench, and now I'm not even suiting up for games. Yeah, that guy. And the thing about Quentin Post, he worked really hard on his defense during the offseason because everybody thought that was his big deficiency. And so he worked really hard on his defense. But basketball is a funny game. And when you expend a lot of energy, the one area that's really important for shooting is your legs. And if you're using your legs for a lot of closeouts and a lot of box outs, and defending, you essentially have less energy for your jump shots. And then once you start to lose a little bit of confidence in your shooting, that's it can be really brutal. And when your coach pulls you after 6 minutes, no matter what, and that was the hard part about watching him, because some games he'd be 2 for 2 with the 3 pointers, and in 6 minutes, Steve Kerr would pull him, and he'd bring in Gary Payton II or Brandon Pajemski. And if you're quitting post, it's got to fuck with your head a little bit. It's like, come on, I just hit 2 3 pointers. Why are you pulling me out? you know. So bringing it back to Cornyn versus Ken Paxton, I think Paxton has the harder road astrologically, with the Saturn square to his sun and Neptune square to his sun. And even if he manages to defeat Cornyn, he still has to go up against Tallarico, who is a demonic little shapeshifter. And he really is. This guy is something else. He comes off like, I don't know how would I describe him. He comes off like a country corner Jesus, right? He comes off like a country corner Jesus, and he's very articulate. He's extremely articulate, and he went to seminary school, so he knows the Bible, but he also kind of twists it around a little bit, and has really embraced a very SJW version of the Bible. And he kind of looks the part of a clean-cut, scrubby little faced Texan man. I think he's gay, even though he's been known to visit a number of OnlyFans pages. The guy's in his 30s. He's not married. And look, you can be in your 30s, but usually, like, they even told Mike Johnson to get married, right? And he's as queer as a $3 bill. So Mike Johnson took the advice because he's got a political career. He's got to have a beard. James Tallarico doesn't even have a beard. So that's who ultimately either Cornyn or Paxton are going to go up against. And Paxton has corruption charges from years ago that were never, ever fully settled. So if you're James Tallarico, if you had to go up against either of these guys, I think Paxton is the one that has the most skeletons in the closet. And then astrologically, I think Paxton is at the greatest disadvantage, especially when we get into the midterms, and then we have the Saturn retrograding back and squaring off against Ken Paxton's sun. A long way to answer your question, but there you go. Astrologically, I think Paxton has the harder road. Okay. What else do we have here? Let's see. Peter Bio, what's going on, Peter? Shelly Myers here. Down the wombat hole, Mars, Saturn, Aries, ruthlessly returning to the base of survival. How have people been getting on with all this Mars? Have you been fired up and engaged in action, or have you found it a tad irritating? I had an irritating day the other day, I have to say. There was a day where it felt like the gears were grinding. But by and large, I found the energy to be much better. I mean, look, I had Saturn and Neptune opposing my sun for months in Pisces. I'm just really grateful to get out of that waterlogged anchor at the bottom of my chart. So I'll take a little raw and edgy over just 35 pounds of water weight any day. Let's see. Meow Meow, what's up? I just listened to a YouTube show about algal conjunct Venus and Taurus. Ooh. Let's see. We can talk about that tonight. Don't lose your head. That's right. She was good. She said algal was feminine power that people were afraid of. I guess. I don't know. I mean, algal is algal, right? It's the Medusa star. She got her head cut off by Perseus. So there was, anyway, I think algal, for me, the concept of algal, just one man's concept, is that it represents the unification of the body and the brain, right? That they're connected, that they're one entity. I don't know if you ever saw, oh God, boy, I can't remember the name of the movie now. Fuck, hold on. Uh, let's see. I wasn't planning on going here, but hold on 1 second. Uh, mm, 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 mm. Let's see. The movie that I'm thinking of is, hold on 1 second. The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. And that is a Terry Gilliam movie. And Uma Thurman plays Venus arising out of the clam. Robin Williams plays an algal character in that film, and he plays this giant on the moon whose head is separated from his body. And the head was all logic and rational reason, right? And all his body wanted to do was just hump. And I always felt like that was an interesting expression of algal, and that how algal in many ways is a dismemberment of our ability to be at times animalistic and primal and intuitive, with the mental capacity being separated from it, and that it represents um, a split between those two capacities of the human experience. And the whole idea with algal, right? The word algal comes from, well, we get the word alcohol from algal, where if you drink too much, you lose your head, right? And it gets back to this idea that the head and the body are just two distinctly different things. And the ultimate expression is where they're combined as one integrated being. And for people who don't have that in their lives, right? Like they're, you can see there are people that that sometimes they're just very heady and just cut off from the rest of their body. Or sometimes you'll find people that are just completely primal, and all they care about is, pleasure and gratification, and don't really have any ability to like plan or think ahead, right? Algal is the bridge between the two of those aspects. That's how I've always seen algal being integrated. And one of the things that can be helpful if you have aspects around algal is to be able to get in touch with your voice. And the voice doesn't mean that you have to talk about your past experiences, although that could be helpful. It can be done in any number of ways, through singing, through chanting, through toning, ways that are very nonverbal and connects you up into what really is your fifth chakra. I mean, that's what algal represents the fifth chakra. So, yeah, it's a very interesting blinking star, and Venus conjunct algal. Uh, how I would look at it is that it would cause us to take another look at what beauty is. You know, that's what I mean, this is how I would interpret it, you know. And but also it could be um a reintegration of the senses too in some ways. Like I could totally see that. Like, well, when I get my new car, maybe it'll be an expression of algal. We'll see. All right. What else we got? Bu- 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 Orbs are viewing you. They're everywhere. The orbs are, hey, Diane. What's going on, Diane? Painted Torso. Hello, Painted Torso. We got Neo the Wise. San Jose in the house. All right. My old haunts. Let's see. Alyssa Ayers is here. What's up, Alyssa Pengredy? Olivia Provers. There's Amy, Star Dreamer. Kelly Zat. Lapicius. Lois Francis. There is comfort going through Hades together. Well, thank you for the compliment on the shirt. Art Seer, what's going on? What's happening? 0 degree Venus in Taurus. Oh, ain't you? Yeah. How really feeling the Aries energy. Hey, Aries energy will get your ass going. That's for sure. Algol is near Venus. Yes. Let's see. I've been blessed by great neighbors in my small town. When you put it out into the ether, it shows. That's cool. That's really cool. That sexy Minotaur. Oh yeah. Monster love. Monster romance. What is Slipknot? Slipknot is a musical group, Barbara. It is a heavy metal, new metal, emo, new emo, Midwestern slasher goth metal group. There you go. Yeah, Linkin Park came out of they're very different than Slipknot, though. Very different. I know, but I don't know the name. Trump signs order to speed up psychedelic drug treatments, a sneaky move to make psychedelics synthetic and now that's a really good observation. That is a really good observation that they're gonna commandeer the medicinal side of things. That Saturn Aries show was amazing. Thanks, Rafi. Appreciate it. Let's see. My first Saturn return was brutal. Oh. About Trump, someone said that they met a Trump Epstein survivor, said that Trump was a sadist. And they were glad that Rudy Giuliani was present because they knew that there wouldn't be a murder. Wow. That's a big statement. Let's see. Hey, we got Benito Diaz. What's going on, brother? Sounds like a great program. Well, let's hope so. Let's hope so. Sound is good. That's even better. That's better. We got a Steve sighting. Okay, the show can start now. Now that Thor at the door, now that the man with the hammer is here, we can get into it. Okay. You got the car already? Yes. Paxton doesn't look well. He looks sick. He's also a little too close to Trump to win the election. Well, Cornyn basically just kissed Trump's ass. Well, not really. In the beginning, he didn't, but all of a sudden, he changed tunes. I just think you could be right, meow meow. I think Paxton with that Neptune Saturn square to his sun. I don't think it bodes well. I do not think it bodes well. Let's see. Wishing the best for the Dutch guy. Yeah, I know, man. I feel bad for Quentin. I wish I could sit down and talk to him and give him some astrological advice, but that Neptune Sun conjunction is a bit much. Let's see. Yes, the G-Man, Catherine Rosen. Hey, Catherine. Oh, I look great. Well, thank you. It must be the filter I'm using tonight. Now I got no filters on tonight. Let's see. What else we have? Look, yeah, he's got like gay vibes. Rafi's got the gaydar on Tallarico. He's totally got gay vibes. I am in a different location. Look up Tallarico's chart. I did that one night. He's got a pretty interesting chart. Yeah, I read it a few weeks back. All right, why don't we do this? Why don't we check out where the planets are right now? I think that'll get me to get into the show. So let's do that. Get into the show a little bit more. So if you like the show, you can always hit that like, subscribe, get the notification, hit that little ringy ding ding bell. It's funny. I was looking at my stats on YouTube, and they've got AI looking at what you do now and giving you feedback, which I did not know before. So I decided to see what kind of feedback that AI had for me. It said that I probably spent too much time talking to people at the beginning of the show and talking about my cats, although AI did like my thumbnails, and that I might lose newer viewer engagement. So I'm, AI on the YouTube side is looking out for me. I appreciate that. Let's see. Where are we? No. Oh, I hate this. Okay. Here we go. All right, let's take a peek at where we are right now, astrologically. But before I do it, we do have to have a little bit of TLC for one of our sponsors. And of course, that sponsor is Silver Botanicals. We had Ray on Friday, and he took us through the process of these wonderful nanodent toothpastes that they're making, and the ingredients that are in the nanodent toothpaste. We'll just do this cool mint here as an example. It is remineralizing and made with nanohydroxyapatite. And it's got, it's fluoride free, made with essential oils, and has a little bit of diatomaceous earth in there, some calcium carbonate. This is really very effective toothpaste to remineralize your teeth. You get 3 flavors: the cool mint, the orange chill, star anise. That's 3 months worth of toothpaste. Plus you get the 32-ounce silver tongue oral care, and you get this uncirculated silver dime, and that's all for $76.09. and that's a savings of $91.99. And the shipping on this is kind of expensive because of that 32-ounce bottle of the oral care, and you get that for free as well. And you get this cool little dime. Oh, of course. I always have to burn the first one. There we go. There it is. That's what we're talking about right there. And I showed the remineralizing effect of the nanohydroxyapatite right there. It's right down in there, along with the diatomaceous earth and the essential oils. This is some of the best toothpaste you'll be able to put on your pearlies. And it's 3 months worth. And all you got to do is click on the link, which is in the show notes, and get all 3 flavors plus the oral care, right? The oral care and the uncirculated dime. The world is yours. Silver Botanicals, our good friends here down in San Marcos, Texas. All right, there we go. So let's that's some Aries stuff. So we decided it would be a good Aries promotion to do that. Work on the teeth. All right, let's jump into where we are now. Okay. So let's do this. All right, April 19th. We'll zoom in here. Let's make it bigger. Do that. And then we'll zoom in. I am here for you guys. Okay, so the sun is at 29 Aries. We're anoretic. We're almost out of it. How is everybody's energy today? How was your energy today? Did you guys feel buoyed by some of the other Aries energy with that Mercury-Mars conjunction? Or were you flatlining a bit today as we're about ready to shift into that 0 Taurus tomorrow? It's always an issue. Aries went by fast, didn't it? I mean, it just seemed like it just got here, and now it's gone. So today would be a flat day, energy-wise. And if you did not get enough accomplished today, or in your mind you didn't get enough accomplished, lighten up. It's okay. There is a Chiron Sun conjunction. And it's one of those days where I feel like, well, it's almost over now. But if we had had this discussion earlier today, I would have told you to relax. In fact, I kind of did when we last talked about this on Friday and the moon was in Taurus, where it still is. And by the way, it is in conjunction with Algol and Venus. And we also have Uranus there. If you had a really hot sex robot, tonight would be a good night for robot sex with Uranus and the moon and Venus and Taurus. But we're not there yet. I'm sure we'll be there fairly soon, probably too soon, and then it'll be extremely problematic at that point. But aside from a good robot sex tonight, I'm not sure how easy sleeping will be tonight with Uranus conjuncting the moon. Now, it could be a passive night. You could fall right into sleep, but I think the dream space is going to be really, really interesting, strange, primordial. I would say primordial. I had a bit of a primordial dream the other night. I think it was maybe Friday or Saturday night. It was kind of creepy. It was almost like a version of, I don't know, that show Night Gallery. The Night Gallery always gave me the creeps when I was a kid. It would come on like, oh yeah, this is the guy that did the Twilight Zone. and I'd watch the intro and I'd watch them. I'm like, oh man, this is too satanic and 70s for me. And I wasn't totally opposed to it. There was a period of time where I was kind of into watching like devil movies at the movie theater. I don't know why. I had this weird thing for devil movies in the 70s. It was strange. I guess it was kind of in the air. And I remember watching this movie called The Devil's Reign, and Ernest Borgnine was in it. He played like this master demon, and I think it might have been John Travolta's uh, cinema debut. And I just remember in the end, all these people that were like these demons. It was like this holy rain was coming down on them, and their faces were melting, and everything was melting about them. And it was like, oh, this is interesting. But for whatever reason, I was never into the satanic sort of side of Rod Serling with Night Gallery. To me, it feels like dreams tonight are primal and animistic. So when you go to sleep tonight, pay close attention to your dreams. It feels to me like this is a very archetypal space, right? And even when we bring Pluto into the conversation, the moon and Venus and Uranus are mathematically aligned with Pluto, even though they're in a very different sign. And Pluto, of course, is the underworld. So I would say that your dream theater tonight could provide you with, and there's different levels of dreaming. You guys have noticed that too, right? Different levels of dreaming. And so there are some dreams that are just absolutely got to write them down straight out of Carl Jung profound, right? And then there are other dreams where it just seems like you're working out some kind of a unresolved psychological state, and it's just like the clutter and the noise that you have to work through. I think tonight will be interesting because we also have Pallas at 27 Pisces, which is very prophetic. Kind of gets into a little bit what Rafi was talking about, where people are putting up these YouTube videos of people that have talked about, well, when the United States goes to war with Iran, then these things are going to happen, right? And, for all intents and purposes, we're at some level of war with Iran, even though clearly it's not an official war. And we're still dealing with Neptune, even though Neptune is sort of behind the pack. To me, it is still the fog of war. Do we really know what's going on? I would say the answer to that is no. We have some very interesting pieces that have been put together, but at the end of the day, right, we're still dealing with Neptune and this foggy nature of what's really going on. Now, I had heard that this guy, what's his name, General Kane, nearly walked out the other day on Trump. And at this point, he's about the only anchor that he has in terms of being able to be engaged at a military level, right? But when we look at the Neptune square with Jupiter, those are promises that are never really kept in a lot of ways. Am I right? And Neptune, well, it's really more Mercury, but you've got the Neptune conjunction with Mercury. So this whole idea of having a ceasefire, I mean, here's the problem with aligning with the government side of the story. None of it really sticks. So we have a ceasefire, then the ceasefire has been broken, And then, this is by Israel, by going into Lebanon, and it's renegotiated. And apparently there was some vessel that was boarded. And, it just, nothing feels like it can actually cohere. But the thing about Trump, this is apart from where we are planetarily, which I do still want to talk about. But the thing about Trump is I don't think I've ever met anybody who can spin a defeat or a loss into an absolute victory without any break in character. I mean, it is absolutely, in some ways, it is mind blowing to watch this guy reconstruct reality in his brain and tell people that we're the hottest country in the world and we're doing nothing but winning. And he says it with such utter conviction, right? And then, he's of this school from Norman Vincent Peale, where if you say it enough with enough conviction, people will believe it, and speaking it into existence. And he has this remarkable trait of doing that, but at the same time, he seems to be going off his rocker a little bit. Anyway, we'll get to him later. But just the overall conditions, right? And we've got that Saturn Jupiter square now. That's going to continue to get even more tense. When you get into a Saturn Jupiter square, it's better to under promise and over deliver. You know what I mean? Under promise and over deliver. Like, I don't know, we're working on it, and these people are tough negotiators. They've got some leverage in the area. We're not gonna underestimate them, but I've got a lot of faith in our team and our ability to pull out a solution that works for everybody. And I just would advise everyone to stay patient and hold on. And we're doing the best we can to, make this a winning situation for the people of Iran, who have been oppressed for 49 years, and for the people of the West. Do I have any deadlines or anything? No, I don't. But I can tell you we're burning the midnight oil, doing our best to come to an agreement. Like, that would be under promising. Not like we've won. It's over. And then, oh no, now they're not agreeing to our terms. No, you're not agreeing to their terms, because there are some terms in those 10 or 11 points that are really kind of non-negotiable, right? And that's where we get into the Saturn Jupiter square. It is better to under promise and over deliver than over promise and under deliver. And it's only going to get, I think, a bit more problematic the more that Saturn moves forward. Now, we know that it stops at 14 degrees. So we've got 7 degrees more of Saturn heading in the direction of Jupiter, which means that also Mars is squaring Jupiter as well. And that's a very, very over aggressive timeline. But Saturn and Mars almost negate each other here, right? They almost negate each other. And I kind of see Saturn and Mars right now, just in terms of what's going on in the Pentagon and in the Department of War, or whatever you want to call it, that there's a power struggle going on right now. That's my sense, because everything is behind that sun. Everything's behind that Aries sun. And when you get a Mars-Saturn conjunction together, that is a power struggle. Which one is going to dominate the other? Well, eventually we know Mars will move ahead of Saturn. And I would assume that would also coincide with troops. And are we going to see troops tomorrow on 420? If we do, it will be a terrible sign because that gets us right into the days of Molech. Like we're in the heart of it right now. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see boots on the ground. We're kind of in a new moon phase too. It's generally when you want to launch an attack. You don't want a lot of moonlight illuminating the night sky. So if you wait too long and you get up around 8-9 days from now, you start to get into that moon in Libra, moon in Scorpio. It'll be full, and I don't think it's the best conditions if you're going to do some kind of a ground attack. So whenever Mars crosses Saturn, I think that's where we're going to see some boots on the ground. And, I think maybe they've just been buying time to position everything. But I have no confidence in any of this at all. No confidence whatsoever after Pete Hegseth's performance the other day. I was shocked. Like I was and I wasn't. I watched this guy and he's like a third-rate actor. And he's trying to be profound and he's trying to be deep and he's trying to be somewhat funny with his I slept at a Holiday Inn Express. But the only thing I could come away with from Pete Hegseth was that he was a sadist. Like he reminded me of somebody that you knew in high school that was an absolute sadist and made a career out of being a sadist. That's what he feels like to me. And for him to invoke Ezekiel through Pulp Fiction, I mean, it was almost laughable. So keep your eyes on Mars and Mars eventually overtaking Saturn. I think that's your kinetic moment. That's boots on the ground. That's a power struggle behind the scenes. And we even have the sun coming in and starting to square Pluto. That will be in Taurus, Sun Pluto square. Wow, that's nobody wants to back down there, right? The ultimate in stubborn power. At least today, we have a bit of a respite with that 29-degree anoretic sun. Like there's no energy left in the sun, and especially with Chiron. How many of you people feel a bit wrung out today? By the way, today would have a lot of just wrung out energy, right? Um, yeah, it's almost like how would I describe this? It's almost like a bipolar sky, right? On the one hand, you have all this male energy and Mars energy with the sun and Chiron and Saturn and Mercury and even Neptune. And then once you get past the ascendant, you've got Ceres and Venus and the moon and Uranus all in Taurus, which is feminine. It's really interesting. Very interesting. Um, like I said, pay attention to your dreams. Tonight, I think tonight's dreams they're primordial in nature, like paintings on the sides of the caves in Lascaux or something along those lines. We will be talking about the Minotaur, so maybe I'll be front loading your dreams just a little bit. Just a little bit. So are we ready to move into Taurus season? I mean, things are still going to be hot. Don't get me wrong. We got Mercury and Mars and Aries, Saturn. Things are still going to be hot, especially once Mars moves in front of Saturn. There's some containment with Mars right now, but that's not going to last forever. But Sun in Taurus, it'll be nice. It'd be nice to get a little Sun in Taurus action. But I'll tell you what, though, one of the things we'll see with that Pluto square is, and I think we're already seeing it, but I feel like we're gonna have a war on beef. The Sun Pluto square coming in and uh, making more inroads with lab grown meat. And this whole choke point with the Straits of Hormuz and the nitrogen and the fertilizer, it's not just for crops, but it's also, believe it or not, for things like, yeah, like hay, like hay that the cows use to chew on so that they can eat, right? Or even the corn, which we know sucks and it's genetically modified, but they're still going to grow it and they're still going to feed it to cows. So, how is all that going to go, right? How is that going to affect the raising of uh, farm animals, cows in general? It's not going to be good. And Taurus rules cows. Taurus rules bulls. Taurus rules the big four-leggeds, right? And we get into that Pluto square, and I think we're going to see the price of meat go up even more. Oh, don't worry, we've got lab-grown meat. Don't worry, we've got synthetic psychedelics. Oh, don't worry, we've got synthetic. We can recreate everything that nature did, but better. Coming to a grocery store near I was in HEB on the other side of town a few weeks ago, maybe longer than that, maybe about a month and a half ago. And this is in Kerrville. Kerrville's not very cosmopolitan. So they have these end cap sales, and it's usually products they're discontinuing. So I went to the end cap, just walking by, cruising by. It was like the frozen food end cap. So it was an end cap that was refrigerated, and all their frozen food shit was in there. And I'd say 80% of the stuff on sale was all the Beyond Meat shit. It was all that fake meat, all the plant meat. Like they couldn't get rid of it. Like nobody in Kerrville wants to buy, plant meat. It's not happening. Now, I don't know what people are going to do in terms of a, meat crisis. Whether they'll say, "Hey, give me the lab grown shit." Kind of tastes like it. I'm not sure where people will chime in on that. But I feel like with that Sun Pluto square coming in Taurus, if I were you and you played the futures market, I would if you could play the futures market on beef prices going up, I would go in that direction because they will. They will. And it's going to be related to what they're actually. Now, again, you may say, well, I don't eat that beef anyway. I just eat grass fed and God bless you, organic. So, what happens if we have an issue here in this country where we can't get the same amount of beef that we normally could get because we can't get the ammonia nitrate of the fertilizer to grow the corn or to get the hay to feed the cows? Well, guess what? We'll get beef from Argentina because Argentina got a lot of our money. I think they got $40 billion worth of our money, most of which to help supplement the Argentinian beef market. So coming to a supermarket near you, Argentinian beef. That makes too much sense, doesn't it? I think it's going to be an interesting dynamic between Aries and Taurus. So I would say play hard. I'd say work hard with the Aries energy because you have like no other option really in some ways. And then rest easy. Work hard, rest easy. Find a rhythm. Find a rhythm with it. Venus is got 6 more degrees before it moves into Gemini. So when Venus goes into Gemini, we're going to see that conjunction with Uranus, and who knows? Maybe Palm Beach Pete will have his own reality show by that point. All right, let's talk about the days of Molech. I think we've covered enough ground here. I think the highlight really is this from a big picture standpoint. Mars moving in front of Saturn, boots on the ground from here to here, right? Because as Lenny Kravitz once sang, it ain't over till it's over, and it ain't over. All right, let's talk about the days of Molech. Now, first of all, who is Molech? Well, Molech is an ancient deity from Babylon that was a fiery deity, and children were sacrificed for Molech, right? You would have this high priest, and they would take a baby, and there would be a hot furnace of a flame coming out of the mouth of Molech, and they would sacrifice a baby for the village to Molech. And so Molech is this god of fiery sacrifice, and it comes out of the very dark Babylonian world. And these days that we're in now are usually associated with Molech. And I'll show you a few dates. We'll go through Wikipedia, like 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th. That's really like those 3 days. But it generally from the 15th through the 20th, but we'll just focus on those 3 days. Now, one of the things, and some of you have seen this, but in case you haven't, this is from the 1933 Chicago World's Fair. And it is one of the more disturbing pieces of archival footage that I have seen. And a lot of you have followed this show, have seen this before. And if you haven't, I'm going to show it to you. So this is at Soldier Field in Chicago. And this was 125,000, I guess you would say, American Jews from Chicago at this historical pageant at the 1933, I think 33 is an interesting number, don't you think? World's Fair. And they say it's a mock child sacrifice. And when you watch this, you have to ask yourself, how mock is it? What I'm going to do is I'm going to slow it down just a bit. I'm going to slow it down just a bit. Let's go. Just so you can see it. All right, so here we go. This is a reenactment of what they used to do back in the good old days of Babylon. Here we go. All right, let's take a look at the stage. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is Soldier Field, where the Chicago Bears play. And you can see here the Imagine Star, also looking very Freemasonic. And look at all the people Look at all the people here. And there's the star of the show, Molech. And you got to have the whipping. The whipping is important. Then here's the virgins dancing for Molech. That's the actual scoreboard for the field, by the way. Okay, we got the barbecue going. There's your high priest right there. And they wait till nighttime. Look at that. They got to get it good and fired up. There he goes. Right. Into the belly of the beast. Right there. Everybody is ecstatic. Wow. Should I play it again? All right, so this is without the dramatic music. It's the same stuff. But look at when they bring this out. It's daytime. And they don't, they're whipping this crowd into a frenzy. How do you think this would play in modern society? Look at this. And they're all dressed in white, just like at the Diddy parties. And then finally, right later, the lights are on. This is hours later. They've worked themselves up into a lather. Oh, look at this, the procession of the high priest. So we didn't see this before. Look at that. All those people there. Look at this. Wow. All right, let's go back. No, we don't want that. We don't want that one. So you guys, that's what it looks like, right? Go back to the first one. So this thing goes on for quite a while. I mean, this almost looks like noon. The production, the number of people. That's where they cook the brisket. This guy's the pit boss. Bye-bye, baby. And they're all happy. Look at them. They're ecstatic. So that is a reenactment, right? That is a reenactment of what they used to do back in the unholy days. And when you look at some of the events that take place, now this took place, I believe, on July 3rd. 1933. So you get 333, right? 7333. So it's not quite during Taurus season. But what's interesting is that July 3rd, of course, is the day before the United States birthday, July 4th, and the Sun and Sirius are in conjunction with one another at that time. What was happening on July 3rd? Let me just check that year. I've never really looked at that day. Let me just look at the solar chart. All right, 1933. July 3rd. All right, what do we got? Let's see. That was on a Monday, and we have the moon in Scorpio. Mercury in Leo, Venus in Cancer, Mars in Virgo, Jupiter in Virgo, Saturn in Aquarius retrograde, Uranus in Virgo. A lot of purification. Uranus in Virgo, Pluto in Cancer, true node in Aquarius, and Chiron in Gemini. So not a lot of Taurus symbolism on that day, but the moon in Scorpio is interesting, and there's a lot of Virgo energy. Mars Jupiter conjunction with Uranus, and then Neptune. So 4 planets in Virgo. So like high strange purification. July 3rd, 1933. Okay, so these days of Molech have very interesting events associated with them. So we're just going to go through a few of them from the 17th of April to the 20th of April. And some of them are really fascinating. Now, if you go back to 1521, one of the great apostasies takes place. And that's on April 17, 1521. It's the trial of Martin Luther. And it's over his teachings, and begins during the assembly of the Diet of Worms. Initially intimidated, he asks for time to reflect before answering, and is given a stay of 1 day. So Martin Luther is put on the spotlight for the Reformation, and it happens on April 17th, which is connected to these days that are considered to be high unholy days. Let's put it that way. Okay, let's see. Some other interesting stuff happens on this day, but more along the 20th century. So in 1907, April 17th, 11,747 people got processed through Ellis Island, more than any other day. 1912, on the kind of on the eve of the Bolshevik Revolution, you have Russian troops opening and firing on striking goldfield workers in Siberia. Remember, the idea of these days is this unfortunate notion of sacrifice, right? What else do we have here? Let's see. The Bay of Pigs invasion, 1961. That didn't go so well. Did it? Nah, I don't think so. Sirhan was convicted of assassinating Robert F. Kennedy, April 17th, 1969. Now, this is really brutal. On April 17th, the Cambodian Civil War ends, and the Cambodian genocide begins. So the amount of people estimated that died during the Cambodian genocide was somewhere between 1.3 to 1.4 million people. And it all starts on April 17th, 1975. Can you imagine that? 1.3 million people slaughtered by Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge. What else do we have? There's something else. Oh, well, I guess a Palestinian suicide bomber detonates an explosive device in Tel Aviv, right? But to me, the big one here is this whole thing with Cambodia. And that's what you have when you get a lot of sacrificial bang for your buck. All right, so now we're on the 18th of April. Let's go through some of these days. The trial of Martin Luther actually begins during the second day. He refuses to recant his teachings despite risk of excommunication. This is a huge day, right? This whole period in 1521 reshapes Christianity, and it happens in the final degrees of Aries, and on these very inflammatory days, right? So we've got some American Revolution action. We got the 3/5 compromise, and then we have some earthquakes. So in 1902, we got a 7.5 in Guatemala. 1906, the San Francisco earthquake in 1906 kills more than 3,000 people, making one of the worst natural disasters in American history, April 18th. And if you saw any of the footage, San Francisco looked like it was incinerated by a bomb. We get the beatification of Joan of Arc. We have a fire that kills 118 people at a wooden church in the small Romanian town of Costesti. Most of them were school children after starting during a Good Friday service. When you know about these days and you see something like that, you have to ask yourself, was this intentional? I mean, truly. Sure, it's a wooden church, but was this intentional? Most of them school children, right? That follows the sacrificial pattern. Superman debuts in Action Comics. Now the cover is dated June 1938, but we got a Superman sighting. Let's see who else we have here. What else? Jackie Robinson makes his regular season debut with the Montreal Royals, so it becomes the first integrated professional baseball team. We got an Operation Big Bang. Gamal Abdel Nasser sees his power in Egypt, so he took that. He was a general, and he snatched the crown in Egypt. And then we get into some airline stuff here, right? We got East African Airways Flight 720, a rejected takeoff from Addis Ababa, killed 43. What else? This is really interesting. I didn't even know this. The United States launches Operation Praying Mantis against Iranian naval forces in the largest naval battle since World War II. It was 1988, Days of Molech. How about that? And here's where we really start to heat up, is the 19th and then the 20th. All right, so we'll still have some Martin Luther information here coming through. We have the Lisbon Massacre, 1506. 2,000 Jews have been forcibly converted to Christianity or slaughtered by Portuguese Catholics. 1529, it is the beginning of the Protestant Reformation at the Second Diet of Speyer. So this is where Martin Luther is able to actually prove his point that there needs to be a reformation within the church. It's huge. It's all happening during these days, right? Let's see. James Cook has Australia in its sights, right? Let's see. 1903, the Kishinev program or pogrom in Kishinev, Bessarabia begins, forcing tens of thousands of Jews to later seek refuge in Palestine and the Western world. Oh, how about that? That's happening during this period of time. Mae West got in a little bit of hot water. Let's keep going here. Charles Manson sentenced to death. And then the year before we had, 2 years before was Sirhan Sirhan sentenced to death during the same time wave, right? Let's see. And here we go. 1985, 200 ATF and FBI agents lay siege to the compound of the white supremacist survival group, the Covenant, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord in Arkansas. Now, this is the beginning of the Clintons going after quote unquote white Americans. It was their war on patriots. So 1993, right, which is going to be 8 years later, the 51-day FBI siege of the Branch Davidian building in Waco, Texas, ends when a fire breaks out. 76 Davidians, including 18 children under the age of 10, died in the fire. Well, the fire was started by it looked like a combination of a tank and a half track, and they were injecting fuel into the remains of the Branch Davidian compound that they had been basically shooting up and shelling for the previous 51 days. And then they lit it on fire. And then once it started to burn, they began to basically bulldoze it, right? So this is a sacrifice right here, right there, boom. 1995, 2 years later, we've got the Oklahoma City bombing at the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. 168 people, including 19 children under the age of 6, are dead. Can you see a bit of a pattern here? Let's see, Boston Marathon, right there. Bombing suspect Tamerlane Tsarnaev is killed in a shootout with police. His brother Dzhokhar is later captured hiding in a boat inside a backyard in the suburb of Watertown. Tamerlane Tsarnaev was not killed in a shootout. I saw him fully unclothed with his hands behind his head get escorted into a squad car during the night where all of that stuff started to go down. That is a complete and utter lie. I watched it happen live. A killing spree in Nova Scotia, Canada, leaves 22 people dead and a perpetrator dead, making it the deadliest rampage in the country's history. Are you sensing a bit of a pattern here? So we'll go out to the 20th, the great 420. Okay. So what do we have on 420? Let's see. Uh, 20 Jewish children used in medical experiments at Neuengram are killed in the basement of the Bullenhauser Dam School. Okay. There's that. And there was also Columbine. Yeah, there we go. 1999, Columbine. The high school massacre, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold kill 14 people, injure 23 others for committing suicide. Lots of high strange there. Am I right? The Johnson Space Center shooting in 2007. William Phillips barricaded himself with a handgun, not NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, before killing a male hostage and himself. The Deepwater Horizon drilling rig explodes in the Gulf of Mexico, killing 11 workers and beginning an oil spill that lasted 6 months. Talk about a fucking ritual. 420? Really? Deepwater Horizon? That was brutal. Absolutely brutal. Let's see. It's interesting that we have these people that are found guilty during these times too. So now in 2021, we have Derek Chauvin found guilty of all charges in the murder of George Floyd by the 4th Judicial District Court in Minnesota. So we have Derek Chauvin, we have Charles Manson, we have Sirhan, and they're all found guilty in different years over this 3-day period. So tomorrow is 420, which also happens to be, of course, Hitler's birthday. And not that I want any ill to happen in the world. I really don't. It's like I got 3 planets of Libra. I want to see us live in peace and harmony together. Although I'm not sure it's completely possible. Maybe not on this timeline just yet. But we got a day ahead of us tomorrow for 420. And if I had to make a prediction, tomorrow would be boots on the ground. Something going down big in and around Iran. Now, they've been gaming the system money-wise, right? Like there's been a shit ton of money where people are, it's really egregious. Like somebody's playing the market and saying, okay, well, the Straits of Hormuz are open and they're getting in and they're making a profit off of either the stocks going up or playing like Kalshi or Poly Market to go down. So, I mean, somebody made a $500 million trade. Gee, I wonder who, over the announcement of what was going on with the Straits of Hormuz and oil being able to pass through freely for a brief period of time. I wonder who made that trade. And when you think about it, like when you really wrap your head around that, that's some Taurus territory, right? To me, that feels very Taurus. And it also gets into that Saturn Jupiter square that we were talking about, where there are people who are profiting. Man, people will say, well, war is one of the biggest economic drivers, which is true. It's a huge economic driver. Countries' economies tend to do well during war. You got a lot of production going on. So we know that to be true, right? But to profit off of it by making announcements and being in on the announcements and the markets that are so multifaceted now, whether it's you're playing the long game with stocks, you're shorting stocks, you're playing poly market, or you're playing Kalshi, right? All you need to do is know when things are going to spike the market ahead of time. You get your bets in. Somebody like Trump says something very important, and then the next thing you know, the markets move, and then you're able to profit off the market. To me, this is probably the most one of the most egregious things of what's taking place. So whether it's Barron Trump or Howard Lutnick or um, Jared Kushner or their consortium or whoever is making money off of these, they're making money. And they're making hundreds and hundreds of millions and millions of dollars, sometimes on single trades. And we're sitting around just doing our best trying to make ends meet and have a little fun with life along the way. And they're creating the war scenario. They're dialing the war scenario down. They're increasing the language of promise and hope so that the markets respond accordingly. And then they're making money off that. And then they shut the door on that. So you can't get back in until they kind of rig the money cycle again. But you're always going to be on the outside because you don't know when these announcements are going to come in. And you don't have a couple extra $100,000 to, throw into poly market and hit it right when oil goes down, I don't know, $15, $20 a barrel, whatever the spike, the low price is on poly market. So that's problematic. And I wonder how much of that is going to come out during this Sun Pluto square with the Sun in Taurus. And like to me, the Sun, and I don't say this in a disparaging way, but to me, like the Sun in Taurus is like mammon. It feels, it has that feel of like, the golden calf or, the cast iron bronze bull of Wall Street. It just has that mammon feel to it. And when it squares up against Pluto, it feels like the beginning of the cracks of corruption because Pluto in Aquarius, as we all have seen, is very digital. And all of these wild things are happening with the internet and AI, some of which are not great, some of which are clearly amusing. So that Sun Pluto square feels like it's the it's fixed, right? They're really early fixed sign. It feels like it's kind of the beginning of the crack in how these crises are gamed, which people aren't really talking about. Well, they should be. All right. Why don't we take a little look at Trump here? Let's do that. Let's take a look at Trumpy's chart. All right. So I've titled this section Trump in the Underworld. And I always found his chart really fascinating. There's this guy named Aloysius P. Fosdike. I don't know if you have run across him, but he's a full-on Satanist, and he contributes to Henry Mackow's site every now and then. And he actually talked about Donald Trump's astrological chart, which I'd seen a lot of his writings on Trump in general, but this one kind of went under my radar. The nickname he has for Trump is called the Heliquin, which is like a combination of Harlequin and hell. And he actually talks about the lack of earth in Donald Trump's chart, which I had seen before, but really hadn't done the astrological math with it. And so his esoteric breakdown of it is that he has uh, an overabundance like he tries to he has an overcompensation for the lack of earth in his chart by the accumulation of wealth. It's sort of like he's so earth deficient that the only thing that can make him feel like he's grounded and on this planet is by accumulating wealth, which I thought that's kind of interesting. But he also talked about how Trump can never really fully manifest anything into the material. And you would say, well, he's built all these buildings. And I would say that, yes, there's some truth to that because he has that midheaven in Taurus. But I would say that the completion of the buildings is probably due to the fact that Trump has some decent people working for him. And I say decent, people that can pull these jobs together. And then what he has been able to do was get the money and the financing for the buildings. And I'm sure he has some idea about what he wants with these hotels, right? I've never stayed in a Trump hotel, but I've heard they're actually very professional and quite nice. But it's his lack of earth, which is kind of disturbing when you really look at it. And the overcompensation with wealth to make up for that lack of earth. So why do I have him in the underworld? Well, it's because Saturn is going through his 8th house, which we have talked about on prior shows. And so I'm going to tell a personal story, which may help you understand Saturn going through the 8th house a bit better if you are going through it now or about to go through it. And I feel like ultimately this is what Trump's challenge is as Saturn goes through his 8th house. So the 8th house, the ruler of the 8th house is Scorpio, right? I mean, that is Scorpio's house. And what is Scorpio? It is the underworld. When you are having a Saturn transit through the 8th, you are going through the underworld and you are in the process of dying in some ways, right? I mean, this is the nature of Saturn going through the 8th house. And when I was 20 years old, I was kind of a hot shit, like young TV producer, 19, 20. And I was at a junior college that had a PBS station. And we had a weekly magazine show. And I did a lot of producing for this show. And I was really, really good at it. And we were doing the last show of the season. And anybody have any ideas? So I came up with this idea to do a show at the local miniature golf place. It was one of those big miniature golf places where they have like 2 courses, batting cage. They have the cars that you race, like arcade, really big place. So I said, well, why don't we do a showdown there, and I'll put together a fundraiser for this school that I was doing some volunteer work at this school. I was videotaping these severely disabled kids. And I'll put together a fundraiser. We'll do a mini golf tournament. And then we'll do a show around the mini golf tournament. I got the green light. So now I had to come up with a mini golf tournament. Malibu Grand Prix was so I went to Malibu Grand Prix and I brought the idea to them. They loved it. They wanted to do it. So now I'm like, okay, I got to sign off on Malibu Grand Prix. Now to go find some celebrities. which I did. I got a member of the 49ers. I got Anna Eshoo. She was the local, I believe, congresswoman. We got Nick Harper from KSOL Radio, and I think I had somebody else to round out the two. There were foursome, two each, right? And then I had to go out and get prizes, and I got prizes like donated, and I did a raffle. I mean, it was like a big deal. Like I planned a whole fucking event. Plus, I'm involved with the TV show, right? And I'm helping co-produce the TV show. And it was a lot it was a big apple, right? I got a Jupiter Sun square in my chart, so I took a big bite out of the apple. And the TV side of it got away from me a little bit. And there was this guy who I was co-producing with, and his name was Howie. And I don't really like Howie all that much. And I remember the first time, Howie was an East Coast guy. I remember the first time we sat down and we're talking about, how things were going to go. He says, well, I'm going to need this from you. 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 And at that time, I was really into like the human potential movement. And I was really big into language, right? I said, Howie, I said, from here on out, can we use the word we? Like, we're doing this together, man. Like, we need this. And he didn't like it. I could tell. He bristled over the fact that he didn't like it. And anyway, this thing kind of gets away from me. And we're down at the mini golf place. And we're doing a walkthrough. And I got into this shouting match with the lead producer, this woman who was our faculty advisor, right? Executive producer of the show. And it got really bad. And I didn't even do anything. Right. And like she just like lost her temper. And I put my hand on her shoulder and she ripped my hand away. I said, get your hands off. It was like really bad. It was in front of everybody. Right. I felt like shit. So the event comes, we pull it off. It's a good show. They edit it. It's a success, but I am not feeling it. Like, I am not feeling it. Like this thing that I'd created, it wound up getting away from me. And it was so bad that I went to go see the head of the, communication arts, the guy who's like the dean, and I got their side of the story and they totally fucking lied. They conspired. They told a different, and it was like, I'm done. I walked away from television. It was like this major moment in my life. I walked away. It took me months to get over from that, maybe even longer. So I wound up going to university and I studied English literature. I just wanted to be away from TV as much as possible. So fast forward, and we're in the year 2005, 2006. I've got Saturn going through my 8th house. And this is when I'm producing the Paul Horn concert. Okay. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I cannot fail. I cannot fail. So I'm doing everything in my power. See, this is what happens when you have Saturn going through your 8th house. So pay attention. I'm giving you a bit of a roadmap. You have to find one thing with Saturn going through your 8th house. Everything else, it's like you've got to discard the baggage. Discard the baggage. Right? Let it go, lighten up. You don't want your boat to get too heavy as it floats down the river Styx. And so I had my goal was to make this concert a success. Every day I got up, I would think, what more can I do to make it a success and what can go wrong? That was it. I was consumed by it. And then the show was on a Saturday, and then the Friday before the show, so the day before, I got Paul an interview down at KCSM, which is this station I used to work at. Well, I wasn't working, I was a student. That's where I had the production thing go south. And Paul goes down there and he does a live interview and it's simulcast both on their TV show and on the FM. And there was a guy there who was on camera in the studio, and his name was Chris. And he remembered me from back when I was in college. and we did the event, and he even brought up the event, right? And how cool it was. And it was like, oh, wow, yeah, this is really interesting that I'm seeing you here back at this place where, in some ways, my life kind of went off track, right? And then the Paul Horn concert was a success for everybody. I made some money. Everybody was happy, right? And what it what it said to me, this was my experience, is that I had experienced soul retrieval, not in a way where I went through some form of hypnotherapy and went back and saw some past life or something where it was painful and I had to relive it. But it was part of my life that was in the past. And I was able to get that part of myself that had experienced shame and defeat and, just taking a real hit to my self-esteem. It's like I was able to put it together, right? So when you've got Saturn going through your eighth house, like that is an opportunity for soul retrieval because you're in the underworld, right? And you have to find one thing that you can lock onto. And when I look at Donald Trump's chart, and he's got Saturn opposing Neptune, Neptune opposing Neptune. Now he's got Mars going through his eighth house. That Saturn's going to go retrograde. Donald Trump is in a battle for his soul. And that's why I'm titling this Trump in the Underworld. And I think we're starting to see it. Like when he posts Slipknot, psychosocial on Truth Social, and we're starting to get all of these really strange tweets, right? And a lot of people say, well, it's 5D chess, and this is Trump just trolling everybody. It feels to me like this is a critical period for Donald Trump. This is a guy who's taken hundreds of millions of dollars from donors. Like he took what 250 million from Miriam Edelson, 500 million, and he's skimming off the top with Bitcoin and all of his newfound tech bros. Like, how much is it worth it? How much is it worth it? If Donald Trump was going to have a come to Jesus moment and not Donald Trump as Jesus, it would be during this transit. It would be more than likely we have to have Saturn go retrograde, which it will. It goes retrograde at 14 degrees. It goes all the way back to 7, so it goes back into opposition with Neptune in his chart. And he's got Mars coming in and opposing Neptune. Like there's a lot happening here with Donald Trump's chart with the eighth house. So I think this is just my take. I think he has, in some ways, reached this pinnacle of like earthly power, right? He's been president not once, but twice. In this second term, he pretty much does whatever he wants. And most of it seems to be at odds with his base, although there are a number of people who still believe that this is all, 5D chess. But it feels to me like he is either gonna find his soul or he's not, right? And that's the Saturn eighth house transit. He is in the underworld, and that Saturn is squaring Mercury. He's going to be very short tempered. He's not going to have a lot of patience with anybody with the Saturn Mercury square at all. Um, and he's got the Pluto opposition coming up. Like it's starting to get close. It won't happen next year, but in 2028, theoretically, when his term as president would end, he's got that Pluto opposition. And a lot of people don't make it through that Pluto opposition. If they do, they tend to live for at least another 10 to 15 years, but most people don't. And I personally, I don't think his health is great. So I think he's in the underworld. And um, maybe this is just me projecting my morality onto Trump, but it feels to me like he could he could find the one thing he's looking for by losing everything. That's what it feels like. But I don't think he'll do it. I just don't think he'll do it. He's got Mars on his ascendant in Leo, right? He's proud and he's boisterous and sometimes he's hilarious and funny. We all know how irreverent he can be. His comic timing is off the hook. But I think this is a man in crisis, like deep spiritual crisis. And I don't think Rebbe Schneerson and the Chabad Lubavitch gang is going to save his soul. Only he'll be able to do that. So this is going to be an interesting period of time because we're not just at war theoretically with Iran or uh, China or some sphere of influence script. We're watching a man who is in some ways in very deep conflict with his soul. That's the real war that's going on. It's the spiritual war inside Donald Trump. And we're going to see, you know, he could come out and it'd be the best. It'd be the best thing for Trump. The absolute best. I believe that he palled around with Epstein and fucked around. Okay, that's my belief. It may not be your belief. It's my belief. It was in the '90s. He had a shit ton of money. Right? He was untouchable. He was Donald Trump. He was the Donald. We're coming out of a period where having sex with minors, through rock stars it was like it happened. Jimmy Page, Mick Jagger, Bill Wyman, right? Like banging lots of young chicks. And it bleeds over ultimately into the '90s. And there's Trump and Epstein. And it's the devil's playground. Now, there are some people who will go even further and that he wasn't just a dabbler in teenage flesh, but might have been guilty of something even worse. But let's just say it's he had a taste for young women like his buddy Jeffrey Epstein and some others did during that time, right? What if he came clean? What if he came clean and what if he just admitted everything? Everything. If that's indeed what happened, right? And he could admit any number of things. That would free him. Of course, he'd no longer be president of the United States and he'd be in a shit ton of trouble. But on the other hand, he'd also be free. I don't think he's free. I think he's a man in chains. I'm not the only one. Candace Owens has said it as much. Tucker Carlson said it as much. And when you see Saturn and just, going through the eighth house in Aries, I mean, just think of that. Aries is sulfuric. Aries is hot, right? I mean, Aries is you know, it's the boiling point. It's metals being turned into liquid, right? I mean, this is the heat of Aries in the eighth house. So this man's soul is being cooked. But he's never I don't think he's ever really shown to be repentant at any point in time, at least publicly. Maybe privately, I don't know. Maybe he has, but certainly not publicly, and certainly not to the American people. And even after COVID, the guy was doing victory laps. Maybe one would have been fine, but come on, 3, 4. Yeah, we know you're Vax Daddy. So I think he's in the underworld. And the best thing that could happen to him would be for him to come clean. Nobody does. Not anybody of his stature. They all hold on to their last dying breath, taking most of their secrets with them to the grave. He built up this very powerful legacy. Now, the other thing too is the eighth house is ancestral, and I kind of think of MAGA as being a bit ancestral, even though it's a relatively new idea, right? But the idea of groups of people gathering together and bonding together under a particular cause is nothing new, right? The Germans did it during World War II. They did it in World War I. The Americans did it during the Revolutionary War. So this idea that groups can gather together and be a part of some form of social change has been demonstrated. There's kind of an ancestral, almost like group mind around something like that. And we have Saturn going through the eighth house of ancestors as well with him. And he was put in charge, right? He became the chief. He's the chief of MAGA. And with Saturn going through the eighth house, even that is at risk. Even that is a peril. And I'm not sure you can just swap new people out for the people that helped build it, because the new people don't have the same values as the original group, which was a real movement. I mean, it's all in recent memory, but come on. The whole MAGA movement is a major phenomenon. And, of course, a lot of it is astroturfed, and you got some alphabet agency in there, but it really struck a chord with a lot of people. And he's decimating that. So anyway, he's going through the soul's journey right now with Saturn right here in the eighth house. and he's not even done. The retrograde that's coming at 14 degrees, that's pretty significant. And let's put that on the board here. And then we'll get into some Saturn return stuff. And we'll get out of here for tonight. Let's go. Or Saturn and Aries. Saturn return stuff. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think he's fighting for his soul. One man's opinion. Okay, so Saturn goes retrograde at 14 degrees Aries on the 27th of July. Okay. It goes all the way back to 7 degrees in December, and that is on 10/11. So when you look at Trump's chart, right, Saturn will retrograde all the way back to just being off of his Saturn or his Neptune right there, right? So it's going to come back around again, basically oppose Neptune one more time. Not directly, but pretty close. And it's the retrograde in the 8th house that I think is going to be the toughest part of his journey. So there you go. Trump in the underworld. You know, if you pray for the guy's soul. Right? Because I don't think that's a man that's at peace. And who knows what kind of entities have got their hooks into him, like Paula White. All right, let's talk about Saturn returns. So your first Saturn return happens at 28 and a half years. It's when it starts. And it's roughly a year and a half to 2-year process, depending upon where Saturn is in your chart. And the first Saturn return is much more difficult than the second Saturn return. The first Saturn return is there to move you from childhood into adulthood. That's what it's there for, right? It is like Saturn says, time out, time to take on responsibility, put away childish things and grow up. And whatever sign Saturn is in your chart, that's the area that you need to focus on. And whatever house it's in is going to be the correspondence of that area that you need to take more responsibility with. Now, it gets complicated when there are other planets that are involved with Saturn in your chart. So in my case, my natal Saturn is in Capricorn. So when I was going through my Saturn return, my natal Saturn also squares my moon in Libra and my Mercury in Libra as well. So going through that Saturn return was kind of heavy, right? Because there were things about that Saturn return that were ultimately very depressing. And I went through a period of being extremely morose. And I felt like I had completely blown my Saturn return. The American astrologer, Alan Leo, I believe he's American, right? Alan Leo talks about 3 types of Saturn returns that you could have. The first one is kind of a textbook Saturn return. So let's say you're in corporate and you're having your Saturn return and you get a promotion. But with that promotion, you get all this new responsibility and you have this immense learning curve where you are now dealing with like authority, having to make decisions for other people. Maybe you have to fire somebody. Maybe you have to deal with other people in the workplace who might be either your equal or slightly above you, who may not necessarily appreciate the fact that you now have this position of responsibility and power, and then you have to deal with it, right? You're no longer like hanging out with the people in the lunchroom and cracking jokes because now you're like the head of a department or something like that. So you have to separate yourself out from the people that you normally would hang out with, right? Like that could be a really hard transition for some people, but that's what Saturn demands. Like in a corporate setting, like that would be okay. You have to separate yourself out from where you've been and what you've been doing, and you now have to grow up. And you may have to do things that you may not necessarily like, but in doing them, you'll build character. You will understand strength. You'll make mistakes. Hopefully, there's a mentor that you can connect with that can help you along the way. Right? That's one version. Some people get married on their Saturn returns. I've seen this. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing per se. If the other person has gone through their Saturn return, it can be helpful. If you're both going through your Saturn return, well, hey, you know, I guess you're going to grow together through that. I've also seen people get married before their Saturn returns and not make it through their Saturn returns married. In fact, quite often that's the case. But that's one version of a Saturn return, right? It's going to be like taking on more responsibility in the world. You're putting away childish things. The second version of that would be, let's say you weren't corporate, but you wanted to open a food truck on your Saturn return. Like, so what would you have to do? Well, you'd have to get the licenses, you'd have to get the food truck, and you have to figure out what you were going to sell, right? You'd have to find a spot, you'd have to put it all together. You'd have to get up at the crack of dawn every morning, set your food truck. It'd be the same thing, right? It just, you would just have to do it for yourself versus doing it for a company or a corporation. You would have to take on responsibility. That is the nature of the Saturn return. You have to take on responsibility. I don't care what sign it's in, right? If it's in Virgo, maybe you have to take responsibility, for you playing second fiddle all the time and saying, you know what, this is what I'm meant to play for now, but, let me learn a few things here and I can work my way up so that I'm not just always playing second fiddle and always serving people in a way where I'm not feeling really appreciated. I mean, it just depends on where Saturn is in your chart. So the first Saturn return, you've either got sort of, let's call it the corporate model. We'll throw marriage in there. And then there's the independent model. Either way, you have to take on responsibility. If you don't do either of those, then you lose the potential for your Saturn return. And that was the dilemma that I found myself in when I went through my Saturn return. I was almost stuck between worlds. And I don't think, honestly, that I got as much out of my Saturn return as I could have had I gone either way. And there were ways, there was a period where I started to write, I started to get published, Pacific Northwest magazine. I started to get some chops, but I was still miserable because it was reanimating this Saturn square that I have with Mercury and the Moon. So not only was it going through my Saturn return, but it was hitting the Saturn square in my chart, and nothing was making me happy. It was just I was miserable. And actually was married. I got married on my Saturn return, and that didn't turn out so well because I couldn't get out of this hole with the Saturn square. It was very difficult. But when the second Saturn return came around, I had worked on enough of those issues between the two Saturn returns that I didn't have to go through the same thing. By the time the second Saturn return came around, it's when I did my first event for Chattaria in the Hill Country. Right? That was when the second Saturn return came around. And it was great. I took on a lot of responsibility for that and lost a bunch of money, but we had a great time. And that was in 2019. And I think we did the last one in 2024. So we did for 5 years out here in the Hill Country. And in some ways, I kind of made up for it, right? It was like, okay, I'll take responsibility for this. I'll take responsibility for this event. I'll do the follow-up and, the whole nine, right? So your second Saturn return, it doesn't have the same amount of hooks in you that your first one did. So if you're going through it, don't stress out about it. And that was one of the things that, honestly, I got a lot of bad information on my first Saturn return when I was growing up in California. Everybody knows a little bit of astrology in California. This is even in the 80s. And people would ask me, well, how old are you? And I said, oh, I'm 24. Oh, you haven't gone through your Saturn return yet. I'd say no. And they would always have something, very, very ominous to say about the Saturn return. I was like, I'm looking at my watch. I'm like, when is this Saturn return thing coming? Because I was already pre-programmed to have like a shitty time. And if somebody like me had been around to talk to me about the Saturn return, I might have done a little bit better. But everybody talked about it in a very faded kind of way. And that was my experience with it. So what I'm here to help you with your second Saturn return, that it doesn't have the same weight as your first. The hooks are not in you in the same way. And there may be a few things that maybe you didn't do during the first time around that you have to clean up or pay attention to. You'll know it when you see it. You will know it when you see it. If you're aware, you'll know it. And then all you do is you course correct ever so slightly. And the course correction part is critical. And then you can have a completely different experience, but it's not the same. Right? It's not the same. And if you have Saturn in Aries, you've had basically 28 and a half years to work on being independent and having a sense of quote unquote personal power. Because that's the nature of Saturn and Aries, right? It's like usually you have an authority figure. A lot of times you have Saturn and Aries have military fathers. And they have to deal with military fathers and moving around a lot and the hard hand of, a father that can be very, very strict. Now, there could also be some kind of devotion to that father, but usually Saturn Aries military dad, right? So you have to find your independence under the auspices of a military father. I'm not saying everybody that has Saturn Aries has that, but if it's not a military, it's certainly an authoritarian father, right? Now, in some cases with Saturn and Aries, it's the father that doesn't give a fuck and just leaves, which is almost as bad as having an uber authoritarian father. In either way, you have to resolve your own personal relationship with power, authority, and consent. So this Saturn second cycle with Saturn, hopefully you've resolved some of that. And that, over the last 28 and a half years, you've been able to work on being independent and resolving issues with, I would say petty tyrants in your life so that you're not pushed around by them anymore. And that the whole idea with Saturn and Aries is for the individual to experience a type of personal sovereignty so that the expression of your will could work in accord with the greater structures of your life. And then instead of fighting against them, you're in alignment with them, in which case you can achieve a great deal. So if you're going through your second Saturn return, the thing that you'll probably have to watch out the most for is this whole idea of power. Whether or not you have it, if you have it, what does it look like? How does it feel? Do you give it away? How quickly do you give it away? Are you scared of giving it away? Do you hold on to it too tightly? Right? This is all about your relationship with your personal sovereignty. And ultimately, if you're a woman, it's your relationship with your father and men. Aries is male energy, right? Maybe you're a female that works in a very masculine world. Maybe you're a mechanic and you're going through your second Saturn return. I mean, maybe you went into the military yourself. Quite possible. Don't come back in. Tricky time for that. And I think men going through their Saturn return, the first one is real. It's tricky. I think it's tricky, that first Saturn, because we had Saturn in Aries, 1968, 69, 70, right around there, right? So that's when people had Saturn in Aries. They were born with Saturn in Aries during that time. So that meant that 30 years, so it'd be 2008, right around 2008, you'd be, 1998, you'd be going through your Saturn return. So if you were a man who was born during that time, we have another Saturn cycle, 1997, 98, 99, that's a whole other Saturn cycle, right? So if you're a man, we'll do the Saturn cycle of 1997, 98, 99, right? You're tasked with figuring out how to be a man, how to be able to stand up and take responsibility for what you've done, and in some cases, what you haven't done. And I think that's the hardest part at times with the Saturn return. Especially the first one, you look at your life and you say, you know what, I've fallen short in some of these areas. What do I need to do? How do I get with the program so that I feel like I'm building something, whatever that thing is, right? So the second one's not too bad. I wouldn't stress out about it too much. Just be aware of things that you may have not done, quote unquote, correctly during the first one. And they'll come up, you'll know it. But it won't be a replay of the whole thing because you're not the same person. You've gone through 28 and a half years of living and learning and growing. And if you're watching this stream, I'm assuming that you have grown because, none of you are dummies. You're all, I think, very self-aware and spiritually conscious. So to think that you haven't grown in 28 and a half years would be, I think, a complete, I don't know, misnomer, illusion. So I have faith in you. Just clean it up a little bit. That's all you got to do. All right. We've been going for 2 hours and 33 minutes. So I think we're going to get out of here. And we've covered quite a bit, haven't we? We were in hell with Donald Trump. We looked at the flaming baby sacrifice of July 3rd, 1933, with Molech at Soldier Field in Chicago. We looked at some of the harrowing events of these days. We cracked open the current planetary influences, watching out for boots on the ground, covered Saturn returns, Saturn through the 8th house, the soul retrieval. It's all there. A Sunday night chock full of information and hopefully a little entertainment along the way. All right. If you're interested in a personal reading, you can find that listed here. You can get a link to that. We should have the book coming out here, I don't know, the next few weeks. And I'm really super happy and proud of, not proud, but I'm really happy and delighted that it was a real team effort to be able to get it to a point where it's almost ready to be distributed amongst the masses. So again, I just want to give a special thanks to Bruce McDonald and my good friend Jamie down in Panama, who have kind of masterminded this. And it's 350 pages long. This is a book where if you want to learn astrology and you want to give it to somebody who wants to learn astrology, this is the book. And it's basically my course that has been shaped into a book form by none other than AI. So it is literally my voice converted to the written word. And one of the things that I've always prided myself with was being able to take something that's fairly complex and to break it down into a form where people can understand it. And there's plenty of that in this book. So I'll let you know when it hits Amazon. It will be a hardcover, and I think there's going to be an e-reader version of it. So it'll be like a reference book that you got when you were in high school, like the McGraw-Hill books that Robert Maxwell produced. The Knowlton books, right? Anyway, that's coming soon. All right, we'll be back on Tuesday. We're going to have a limited schedule this week because I am going to be traveling a little bit. So we'll have the weather on Tuesday and Wednesday. And after that, I might be doing a little bit of content from the road as I go to pick up my new chariot, my new Aries chariot. Anyway, that's a new chapter. Take care, everybody. Chatari, you're the best. Thanks for hanging out. Don't forget True Hemp Science, 15MINS is the code. When you spend $100 or more to get some of the best CBD products on the internet and for your body, mind, and spirits, you'll be happier as a result. And you wind up supporting the circle of life here with Chris and myself and the plant and you. All right. We'll see you all on Monday. Take care. Bye for now.